Hello everyone, this is Cari for Redesign with Prima, and today I'm going to show you how to make these really beautiful vintage style ornaments using our little frames from the Ornate Legacy mold. I'm going to start with some clear resin, and I'm going to add some of our pigment powders right into the resin. So they add a shimmery effect, but they also tint the resin as well. And the set comes with all different kinds of metallic hues, which is really nice. I use sort of a aged golden hue from the set. They're not labeled specifically per color, but any of them that you choose will be absolutely beautiful. Make sure that you mix it into the resin really, really well. Like mix, mix, mix. It does look a little bit transparent, but that's okay. That's how it's supposed to look. I go ahead and pour the resin right into the mold. And what I like to do is use a toothpick to move that resin into all the little tiny details. This just helps get in there without a lot of the air bubbles that you tend to find sometimes when you have really delicate designs. Another important thing to remember is not to over pour in the molds. Pour just below the level line and let the resin sort of level itself off, because it does tend to heat up, so it will expand. Also make sure that you do this on a very level surface. That really helps so that your mold castings come out nice and even. Again, I'm using the toothpick here to move it around. And another thing I wanted to mention too, when you start adding pigments and art mediums to your resin, the work time is a little bit less. So the more you add, the quicker that you have to pour. So I tend to just add just a little bit because really it doesn't need an awful lot. Now I've waited 24 hours for my castings to cure in the molds. That typically is true for most clear resins. And here I've demolded them. Now you can see that one side is shiny. Our mats are matte molds, so they don't come out shiny on the outside, which is totally fine, but they do come out shiny on the back side. What I love about this tinting is that now I can go ahead and add my other art mediums to enhance the designs the way that I like. So you can see that they're just slightly tinted, which is a great base for me to add the art mediums to the surfaces. What you can also do is cast these in clear or the fast curing resin, which is in white. You can paint them black and then add your gold on top. But I really like this extra step because it adds a little bit more detail and dimension to my overall design. Now I'm going in with our Noir Glaze. So the glaze you want to add with your brush, and make sure you get into all those little details because that's what you really want to highlight. And then you are going to take a baby wipe and just kind of wipe back some of that glaze. So it's going to stay in all of the details, all those little nooks and crevices, which is little dainty flowers and ribbons, which are really, really beautiful. So my goal here is to highlight all of those details and give it just, a little bit of dimension. So I do this with all 4 frames. I add the glaze, I work it into all of the details with my brush, and then I take a baby wipe and just wipe it back as much as possible. Now you can still see some of that gold coming through. All of the black stays within those little intricate details and makes them really pop. And you can take away more of the glaze or leave it, it's up to you. But I tend to wipe it back until I'm really happy with it. If I've wiped away too much, then you can always add more. So one bit of advice I can give you is work on one frame at a time, because if the glaze tends to dry and, stays onto the surface for a little bit longer, it's much harder to remove. So if you really don't want all of the black to be on there and you just want to highlight the details, I recommend that you just do one at a time, because it will stay on there if you allow it to completely dry before you get a chance to wipe it back. And next we're going to add the images to the inside of the frames. This is Santa Land Sparkle. And I really thought this paper was perfect because the images are smaller. They fit in the frames really, really well. And what I like to do is just cut out a back for the decoupage. You want to make sure that it's a lighter color because that really makes the images pop. It'll make the red more vibrant, the greens, and so forth. So I always give a coat of gesso or primer to any surface I add decoupage to. And now I'm adding the decoupage gel, and I add a really liberal amount because I want that paper to just kind of work its way into that gel. And then you get really good adhesion. You don't get a lot of bubbles, you don't get a lot of wrinkles, and it's a really nice medium to use. It's actually meant to work with the fiber. That's why it's a little heavier. So you want that. That's what you want. I press it in really evenly. I allow it to dry, and then I take these backs and I just choose different images on the decoupage paper that I want within the frame and on the ornament. So here again, I'm just adding more decoupage gel. Now the backs, what I end up doing is I let them dry completely on the paper. I don't cut them out. I just let them dry for a while. Then what I did is I painted the backs with the same gold paint that I'm going to use on the frames in just a bit. And it just makes it look more polished and finished. Now this little image here, it's kind of, too small for what I want, but the frame hides that little edge there where the paper didn't quite fit. So that worked perfectly fine. I love to just test the frame onto the decoupage image before I go ahead and decide on which one I want to use. And then I go over the tops of all of these with another layer of the decoupage gel to seal it and just make sure that it's protected and evenly coated. Here you can see I'm now cutting out the shapes because it's fully dry. I did paint, like I told you before, I did paint it, and it was actually easier this way because they were glued down to the paper. So when I painted, they really didn't move much. And I use an X-Acto knife just to cut around the edges and get a nice clean finish. So now I'm going in with the Sparks paint. This is called Chest of Gold. Sparks paints are a little bit more shimmery. There's like a little hint of glimmer and glitter in it, but it's not like thick glitter. It's a very, very subtle shimmer. It just shines a little bit more than our metallic paints, and I absolutely love that. And I'm going over the frames just very lightly. Like a little bit of this paint goes a long way. You just want to kind of skim over the surface, add that shimmer. So your original color of the frame is still going to come through, and then some of that black is going to come through, and now you're adding just like the finishing touch, and it actually looks like an old weathered frame. Like the three layers together, I felt like added the look that I was going for. And like I said, a little bit of this paint goes a long way, so you just put a tiny bit on your brush and just glide over it very lightly. If you go in too hard with the paint, you're going to cover up some of that black, and it's going to, get into the crevices of all those details, and that's not what you want. You want that black to show through, so it really makes the details of the mold casting pop. The other thing I wanted to mention about these paints is that when they dry quickly and permanently. So I'm not too concerned. I never have had to seal these paints. So when I add it on and let it dry and cure, they are perfectly fine and ready to go. You almost can't scratch that paint off of these surfaces at all. So it's actually a nice time saver. You don't have to add another top coat or sealer to these paints, which I actually love. And I think that these turned out really, really pretty. Now I'm going to attach the decoupage little pieces that I put together to the back of the frame. I use a gel, like a super glue gel. So it's a two-part system. It dries super, super fast because it comes with the spray and the glue. And the two together work great so that you have almost instant adhesion. Like, look at me pick it up now. It dried so fast, and it works on the resin. But you can certainly use any strong glue that you prefer, like E6000, you know, any kind of strong, even Gorilla Glue, I think will work just fine. So I would love to know what you guys think. Like, what other kind of images do you think would go really well behind these frames? Do you decorate more vintage and traditional, or are you more modern? I'm just curious to know, because I think you could, you know, kind of use these frames with something a little bit more modern and do like a little twist of your own on these kind of ornaments. Here I'm adding a silk ribbon. I ran out of my black velvet ribbon, which I used for the original ornaments when I made them. So, so I went with a cream color, but you can certainly go with like a green velvet, a red velvet, whatever you choose. So I just add a little dab of that glue and place the ribbon where I want it. And I make it very neat. But if you want to give it even more of a finished look, a button or a gem or something like that on the back would look really, really pretty. I just left them as is. I thought that they looked completely fine. And I just trim my ribbon as I go. I fold it in the way that I want it to be. And then I add the glue and make sure it's secure in place. That's what I actually love about this super glue as well, because it dries so fast. So I can hold it there just for seconds. It dries, and then I don't have to worry about the ribbon moving around too much. So that's also a nice thing. But tell me also, like, what you guys would use. Would you use string or other elements? I would be curious to know. But I think the ribbons looked so nice, and they're, you know, pretty classic, I believe. And I chose to add ribbon to the bottom as well as the top because I thought it just added a really pretty vintage element to it. Now, to enhance that vintage vibe that I was going for with these, I'm adding the Art Alchemy Sepia Decor Wax. This is by Finnabair. She's one of our designers for Prima, and we love to use her waxes on all kinds of projects. So what I do is I put a little dab on a surface and I grab a brush and I like to just kind of paint it in. Now you could certainly use, you know, maybe like a sponge of some sort or a brush, but I felt like my Finnabair brush, my thin one, worked really well to get into that crevice between the decoupage background and the frame. And you can add a little bit or you can add a lot, you know, it depends on the look you're going for. So it also helps kind of cover some of those areas around the frame just to hide if you have like little gaps or you can see a little bit of that glue come through. You know, the wax is really great for just kind of hiding all of those little blemishes if that happens, which it does. We're crafters, you know, that's what we do. And here they are, all finished. I'm absolutely in love with how they turned out. I hope you do too. Please let me know in the comments what you might like to see next for ornaments or techniques or any of these art mediums. I'll be happy to do that. If you have questions about anything I used today or anything that I did, if I missed a step or you want to, you know a little bit more, please let me know in the comments. I answer, I let you know like what I do. I'm happy to do that. And please stay tuned. We're going to have a lot more ornaments coming up just for more, you know, inspiration for the Christmas season coming forward. Be sure to follow and subscribe, and we really appreciate you watching. Have a great day.